All right, hello and welcome. Today, we're diving into one of the most influential and, let's be honest, most controversial figures in all of human history, Jesus of Nazareth. Now, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to set aside faith, set aside theology, and put on our historian hats. We're going to look at this like a historical investigation, because really, to understand so much of our world, you have to understand where this all started.
So, this is the big question for us today. Forget what you think you know from church or from movies. If we approach this like a detective, investigating a 2,000-year-old cold case, relying only on the clues, only on the evidence, what kind of person do we actually find?
Okay, so first we've got to get our terms straight. You'll hear scholars talk about the historical Jesus. What they mean is this: it's the person they can piece together using only the tools of history. It's about separating the man who lived in first century Galilee from the Christ of faith who is central to religious belief. Two different things, and we're focused on the first one.
And that means we have to start with the most basic question you can possibly ask. Was he even real? Was there actually a man named Jesus walking around Judea? Or was the whole thing just made up, a myth?
Well, on this point, the answer from actual historians is surprisingly blunt. The idea that Jesus never existed, what's sometimes called the Christ myth theory, is a fringe theory. It's way out on the edges of scholarship, and pretty much every expert in the field rejects it.
So let's talk about that consensus for a second. Just how strong is it? Who are these scholars we're talking about?
And this is what's so fascinating. We're not just talking about scholars who are Christians, we're talking about virtually everyone who is a specialist in this time period. Whether they're Christian, Jewish, agnostic, or atheist, they all agree Jesus was a real person. Take a guy like Bart Ehrman. He's one of the biggest names in New Testament studies, and he's an agnostic. He doesn't believe in the religious claims, but based on the historical evidence, he says there's no question, Jesus certainly existed.
And it's not just the Bible scholars either. You have respected classicists and historians like Michael Grant saying the same thing. He basically says that no serious scholar even tries to argue that Jesus didn't exist anymore, because the evidence against that idea is just, well, as he puts it, very abundant.
Okay, so if the experts are so certain, what are they all looking at? What is this abundant evidence? Let's follow the breadcrumbs. You have to realize, for an ancient figure, the sources we have for Jesus are actually remarkably early. I mean, the letters from the Apostle Paul start showing up just 20 years or so after Jesus' death. That's well within the lifetime of people who knew him. And it doesn't stop there. Within about a century, you get mentions from Jewish and even Roman writers who had no connection to the Christian movement.
And this is how historians build their case. They look for independent sources. So you have Paul, the early Christian, who confirms Jesus existed, was crucified, and had a brother named James. Then you've got Josephus, a Jewish historian, who also mentions a man called Christ with a brother named James. And then the real kicker, the Romans. The historian Tacitus and the official Pliny the Younger both write about Christ and the Christians who worshipped him.
So why is that mention from Tacitus considered historical gold? Well, because Tacitus hated Christians. He called their religion a deadly superstition. He had absolutely zero reason to make up a story about their founder. In fact, he had every reason to want to discredit them. So when a hostile source confirms a detail, historians take that very, very serious.
So his existence is pretty much settled. That allows us to move from did he exist to, okay, what can we know for sure about what he did? And while a lot of his life is up for debate, scholars have basically landed on two specific events that are considered rock solid.
The first bedrock fact, something almost every historian agrees on, is that Jesus was baptized by a man named John the Baptist. And the second undisputed fact is that Jesus was executed by crucifixion on the orders of the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate.
So you have to be asking, right? Out of all the stories in the Gospels, why these two? Why did the baptism and the crucifixion stand out as historically certain? Well, the answer gets us to a really cool tool historians use to figure out what's real and what's not.
It's called the criterion of embarrassment. And the logic is actually pretty simple. If a detail in a story would have been awkward or just plain embarrassing for the people telling it, they probably didn't invent it. I mean, think about it. The baptism? It kind of makes Jesus look like he's second fiddle to John the Baptist. Why would you make that up? And the crucifixion? That was a humiliating, shameful death for our common criminal. It's the absolute worst ending you could invent for your savior. The very fact that these inconvenient details are in the story is one of the best reasons to believe they actually happened.
All right, so Jesus existed, he was baptized, he was crucified. We're on solid historical ground. But the moment we try to move beyond those core facts, that's when the unified picture shatters into a million pieces.
And this is where the real debate is today. Who was he? Some scholars argue he was an apocalyptic prophet, convinced the world was about to end. Others see him as a kind of wandering philosopher challenging social norms. Still others focus on his role as a healer, or as a Jewish messiah, or as a revolutionary trying to bring about social change. All of these are serious theories, backed by evidence, which just shows you how complex the puzzle is.
And that brings us to a really important reality check. This historical Jesus that we've been talking about, it isn't a perfect photograph of the real man. It can't be. As one scholar, John P. Meyer, put it, it's a modern abstraction and construct. It's our best attempt to piece together the fragments that survive 2,000 years of history. It's a sketch, not a portrait.
So where does that leave us? Well, history gives us a firm foundation. It tells us, with a very high degree of certainty, that a man named Jesus lived and died in a very specific way. But the quest to figure out exactly who he was, what he thought, what drove him, that quest is still going on. And it's in that gap, the space between the hard evidence and all the different interpretations, that all the mystery and all the fascination really lies.